Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up, because the internet streets are on fire again, and this time, Martell Holt just got dragged harder than a wig in a Walmart parking lot fight. Now, let me ask you this. How many scandals can one man juggle before he finally drops them all on his own head? Because Martell out here looking like the circus act nobody paid for. But somehow we can't stop watching. And just when you thought this saga couldn't get messier, BOOM, Tasha K slid in with the receipts. The screenshots, the whispers from close sources, and let's just say, sis didn't come to play. Oh no, she came to end careers. We're talking late-night phone calls, alleged threats, courtroom drama, and an elevator showdown so awkward it makes Beyoncé, Jay-Z, and Solange look like a Disney movie. And the question we all have is Martell the victim of a smear campaign? Or has karma finally pulled up with a front row seat and popcorn? Stick around, because what I'm about to break down will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about Martell, Melody, and the entire love and marriage circus. Martell Holt has always been a magnet for controversy, but what is unfolding now is not just another reality television subplot. It is a full-blown scandal with layers that keep peeling back to reveal something uglier underneath. For years, viewers of Love and Marriage Huntsville have watched his rise and fall. From the breakdown of his marriage to Melody Shari, to the very public cheating allegations, to the endless back and forth with side relationships and messy online spats. Yet this time, the conversation shifted when Melody herself decided to go live and speak directly to the audience about the harassment and intimidation she claims to be facing. It was not the typical tearful confessional people expect from reality stars. It was sharper and more chilling, because she was not talking about heartbreak. She was talking about fear and safety. That small distinction is what set the internet on fire. When a mother of 4 who has already endured a public divorce stands in front of her phone camera and says she does not feel safe, people pay attention. Some paid attention with empathy and solidarity, others with cynicism and cruelty, and the divide created an uproar. Enter Tasha K, a figure who thrives in the space where celebrity misbehavior collides with public opinion. When Tasha picked up Melody's live and blasted it to her massive platform, the reaction was nuclear. Overnight, it went from a live stream with concerned fans to a viral event dissected on blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels, and gossip pages. The narrative fractured immediately, with one side rallying to Melody's defense, saying, "We hear you, we believe you," and another side dismissing her entirely, calling her bitter, accusing her of chasing sympathy sales, or worse, claiming she was fabricating everything for relevance. Imagine revealing threats to your safety only to be accused of staging it for clicks. That kind of dismissal is its own form of abuse, and it highlighted how quickly victim blaming becomes a sport in the digital age. Martell's reaction only poured gasoline on the fire. Instead of acknowledging Melody's fear or taking responsibility for the image he projects, he allegedly laughed it off and messaged Tasha, claiming Melody was exaggerating to promote herself, as if putting your safety and reputation on the line is some marketing scheme. Then, almost proudly, he bragged about receiving only a $300 fine and avoiding jail time, as though the size of the penalty somehow proved his innocence. It is a strange flex to use a minor fine as evidence that nothing serious happened, ignoring the reality that the legal system often fails to measure the weight of emotional damage and intimidation. To make matters worse, he even mocked Melody's courtroom appearance, ridiculing her choice of attire while he himself arrived in a tailored suit clearly crafted to send a message. The irony was glaring, yet he seemed oblivious. The circus extended beyond Martell and Melody because secondary characters kept fueling the spectacle. Ariane Curry, widely known as the Other Woman, made her courtroom entrance in clothing that looked better suited for a night out than a legal proceeding. Melody, by contrast, appeared polished, professional, and focused. Yet strangely, it was Melody who absorbed the brunt of criticism online, while Ariane's questionable presentation was brushed off. This double standard struck many observers as cruelly unfair and revealed how Melody seems to attract harsher judgment simply for existing in the public eye. It was the same pattern of scrutiny that has followed her since the beginning of the divorce saga. The drama then escalated into what people now call the elevator moment. Imagine the tension of Martell, Melody, Ariane, Curie forced into the same confined space. The air so heavy it could be sliced with a knife. According to whispers, Ariane even used that moment to poke fun at Melody, taunting her about still being caught up with Martell, as if the years of harassment and intrusion were nothing more than proof of attachment. The cruelty of that jab underscored the twisted narrative at play, where Melody is continually painted as obsessed, when in reality, she is the one attempting to move forward with her life, raise her children, and build her businesses. The person who keeps intruding, sending texts, stirring chaos, and pulling her back into conflict is Martell, not Melody. Yet the storyline crafted by critics attempts to reverse the roles, casting her as the antagonist and him as a misunderstood figure. This is gaslighting in its purest form, and it explains why her supporters rallied so fiercely after seeing the live video. The more Martell attempts to spin the story with smug comments and selective receipts, the clearer it becomes that the common denominator in all the chaos is him. Melody appears in these situations because she is provoked, not because she is chasing drama. By the time the dust settled from the initial wave of reactions, it was obvious that this was bigger than an ex-husband and ex-wife throwing shade. It raised larger questions about how reality television production handles safety concerns, how fans consume personal trauma as entertainment, and how quickly society punishes women for speaking out while excusing men who create the mess in the first place. Melody's text messages to production in the past, asking for help and being ignored, became part of the conversation, showing a pattern of negligence and indifference from those who profit off these storylines. What began as a live video turned into a cultural case study of power, manipulation, and the dangerous consequences of rewarding toxic behavior with attention. As the conversation deepened, more layers of contradiction began to surface, and the public started piecing together details that painted a disturbing picture. The elevator incident was just one example of how toxic patterns had become normalized around Martell's behavior. Fans began digging through old footage, old text leaks, and whispers from behind the scenes, connecting dots that suggested Melody had been asking for help far earlier than most people realized. Screenshots circulated showing her sending messages to producers saying she did not feel safe, asking for someone from production to come to her home during filming, and those pleas were allegedly ignored. The revelation sparked outrage because it shifted responsibility from just Martell to the very network and production team that profited from amplifying the drama. When you put someone's private life on reality television for entertainment, there is a basic expectation that their safety will not be compromised. Yet in this case, it appeared those protections were not offered. The negligence looked intentional to some critics, who argued that the producers knew conflict sold ratings and therefore chose not to intervene. The discussion then spiraled into examining Martell's larger public persona. It became clear that his strategy when cornered was always the same: deflect, mock, distract, and minimize. When Melody spoke about harassment, he claimed it was all exaggerated. When fans confronted him about court fines, he bragged about them as if they were proof of innocence. When the conversation shifted to his personal behavior, he suddenly found a way to make it about Melody's clothing or demeanor. This deflection pattern was so consistent that commentators began calling it his playbook. And while some viewers still bought into his narrative, the majority started recognizing the manipulation. The irony was that every time he tried to downplay her words or ridicule her presentation, he reinforced the very accusations of gaslighting and obsession being made against him. By this stage, the narrative was no longer confined to the show or to fan gossip. Larger questions began echoing across social media about the accountability of networks and producers when the entertainment value they create stems directly from real harassment and conflict. Critics argued that when Melody asked for help and production stayed silent, it was not just carelessness, it was complicity. The cameras kept rolling because the spectacle was too valuable to interrupt. That reality exposed the dark side of the entertainment industry, where human well-being often ranks below trending hashtags and viral clips. The audience began demanding answers from the public. Reactions to these revelations were split. Some viewers doubled down on blaming Melody, continuing the narrative that she was dramatizing events for attention. Others rallied around her more fiercely, posting support, sharing stories of their own experiences with gaslighting, and pointing out the hypocrisy of holding her to higher standards than those directly causing the chaos. It became a digital battleground, with comment sections exploding into thousands of arguments. Every clip, every tweet, every live became evidence in a trial by social media where public perception mattered almost as much as actual legal outcomes. And at the center of it all was Martell, seemingly unaware that the more he tried to spin the story, the more obvious his role as instigator became. This created a sense of suspense, because the more the public dissected the details, the more it seemed inevitable that something larger would come crashing down. If Melody had really been ignored when she asked for help, could the network be held liable? If Martell's behavior continued escalating, could new legal consequences follow? If the audience stopped buying into the show's narrative, would sponsors and advertisers start pulling out? These were not just fan theories, but pressing questions that pointed to financial and legal fallout. What had started as a live video by one woman had turned into a storm with the potential to drag an entire network, a production company, and multiple cast members into the fire. The anticipation grew daily, with each new rumor or leaked receipt adding another thread to the unraveling web. The storm only grew heavier as more so-called receipts began leaking out, and each one chipped away further at the already fragile image Martell had been trying to protect. Anonymous insiders suddenly came forward, claiming that the elevator confrontation was not even the most extreme moment, that there were other incidents off camera where security had to be called in and production chose not to release the footage because it would damage the brand. Whether or not those claims were fully true, no one could verify. But the fact they circulated so quickly showed just how hungry the public was for anything that fit the narrative of escalation. Social media thrived on this uncertainty and the line between confirmed fact and sensational speculation blurred until audiences could barely distinguish between them. The psychology of this cycle was fascinating because even people who once supported Martell found themselves second-guessing their loyalty. Once you start asking questions about whether a man is being protected by a network for ratings, doubt grows rapidly and trust evaporates. By now, Melody's voice had become amplified beyond the show itself. She was no longer just a cast member airing grievances, but a symbolic figure raising broader concerns about how women are treated in environments built on monetizing conflict. As viewers debated these themes, Martell tried shifting focus to his new ventures, posting about business deals, real estate, and luxury purchases. But instead of repairing his image, those posts only reinforced the narrative of arrogance and detachment. The optics were terrible. Imagine being accused of harassment and instead of addressing the claims, you flaunt designer suits and imported cars. Critics compared it to a politician ignoring scandals by holding photo ops at ribbon cuttings, and the backlash was swift. Comments flooded his pages, not with admiration but with ridicule. Sarcastic remarks about how his money should be spent on therapy or legal fees rather than empty displays of wealth. And the more he posted, the more the audience mocked him, turning each new picture into a meme that traveled faster than his intended message. What he believed was control of his image became evidence of his inability to read the room. The ripple effect also started impacting his professional network. Sponsors who once saw him as a marketable face of ambition quietly distanced themselves. Rumors spread that speaking engagements were canceled at the last minute. A real estate firm that had once partnered with him allegedly scrubbed his name from their website. not wanting to attract negative press. None of these moves were announced formally, but the silence was loud. It sent the message that Martell's name had become toxic. That association with him carried risk rather than reward. For someone who built his brand on visibility and connections, that kind of reputational isolation was devastating. It was as if doors that had once opened effortlessly now remained firmly shut. Meanwhile, Melody's supporters kept pushing her narrative into the mainstream. Bloggers picked it up, YouTubers created endless commentary videos, and online forums dissected every sentence she said in her live. Each interpretation, each theory added fuel to the story. For Martell, this was a nightmare because the scandal no longer belonged to him or even to the show. It had entered the public consciousness as a cultural conversation about accountability and power dynamics. When a story reaches that level, it becomes almost impossible to control. Even if he issued a perfect statement of remorse or denial, the tide of discourse had already outgrown him. The narrative was in the hands of the people now, and the people seemed determined to cast him as the villain by the time the dust began settling. The larger question was not whether Martell was guilty of each specific claim, but whether he had any chance of recovering his image. Once trust is broken on this scale, the road back is almost non-existent. Fans do not forget, and in the digital age, screenshots last forever. Every new venture, every attempt at reinvention will be shadowed by the viral clips and whispered allegations of this period. The entertainment industry thrives on redemption arcs, but only when the audience is willing to grant them. Here the audience seemed united in their refusal. They did not want to see Martell bounce back. They wanted to see accountability, consequences, and maybe even the removal of those who enabled him. And so the saga of Martell Holt stood not just as another celebrity scandal, but as a cautionary tale about ego, power, and the cost of ignoring warnings. It reminded everyone that no matter how polished the image, no matter how carefully crafted the brand, when arrogance collides with exposure, the truth has a way of seeping through every crack. For Melody, this battle had been exhausting but also transformative, turning her into a voice for those who felt unseen. For Martell, it had been a collapse, the slow unraveling of a persona that could no longer hide behind charm and bravado. The final outcome remained uncertain, but the message was clear. Reputations once shattered cannot be easily rebuilt. And when the audience decides you have crossed the line, there is rarely a way back into their good graces. Now, the real question becomes, what do you think? Because at the end of the day, this entire saga is bigger than just Martell, or Melody, or even the show itself. It is about what kind of behavior the public is willing to excuse and what lines can never be crossed. Do you believe Martell deserves another chance, or has he finally burned every bridge with his arrogance and recklessness? Should the network be held accountable for turning private pain into public entertainment, or is this simply the price of fame? And where does that leave Melody, who has carried the weight of exposing the truth while battling dismissals and deflections from every direction? These are the questions that keep this story alive and make it impossible to look away, because no matter what side you stand on, the tension refuses to fade. If you think the receipts are undeniable, say it. If you think the narrative has been twisted, speak up. If you want to see accountability, then demand it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, let your voice be heard, and of course, stay locked in, because more truths, more shocks, and more revelations are always coming. Revelations are always coming.